Thank you very much for this very great introduction. It was really nice. And Western solution is a very complicated word, so no very. Also, it's a big honor to stand here in front of you because ethic, I know it's not a very sexy topic. And many of you, you think, okay, we have heard about several times about bias, ethics, and why? Why do we still have this topic? And why do we need this? And I think what I see on a daily basis, I work in consulting, and I see that people think that ethic is something you can just add on to your software solution or AI solution. But unfortunately, it is not the case. You cannot simply add it as like a Jira ticket, put it in your backlog, and then you say, okay, next time we will think about ethic topics. This is not really possible. So, and why is it not really possible? Because at the end, we live in the European Union, and ethics is part of our values. So it is something important, you really should keep track of it. Before I start with the main presentation and go into details about it, I want to get to know you. And I always will ask some questions from time to time, and you have to answer. The reason why I do always this kind of interactive thing with the audience is that I'm the last presentation, and then the fun part starts, and we need to be more active, motivated to listen now the next 50 minutes. And of course, I want to get to know you, how you're working with AI, and also how you work with large language model. So the first question would be to you. Do you use ChatGPT or something similar, Claude or Gemini, for your private work? So meaning, do you use it to generate images for social media postings or for gaming or anything else? Please stand up if you use these kind of AI models in your private day. Just stand up. I mean, you know, we want to be a little bit more active. That's quite a lot. Oh my goodness. Really. I mean, you can stay if you also use it work-related, so generating emails, help with coding. Also still standing. Really impressive. Have you thought about ethics in these machine learning systems? Have you thought about it? I mean, maybe just sit down if you always think about the ethic in your work-related LLM stuff as well. Stay seated. Okay, a few of you, okay. And now a question, who's using large language models in the project? So using large language models and put like a wrapper on it. Use ChatGPT APIs or something else. Who's using it? Stand up if you use it. A few. Okay, I mean, I think mostly a half of you. Okay, really great. And you can now take a seat again. I will come back to you. Don't worry. So the point is I also use it. I mean, mostly for work-related stuff, to be honest. We have Copilot in our company. Just had a talk about Copilot that, let's don't talk about it. Anyway, so the point is every time I use these AI models or I use large language models, Copilot or so, I start to realize that I stop thinking about the output. Maybe you have the same feeling. I stop thinking about biases within this output. I stop thinking about the truth of this kind of output. And this is something I realize also in AI project with customers. They stop thinking. And this is a big issue because at the end, topics like ethics or bias, it's never stops and it's still ongoing and we still have issue in bias. I mean, you would always think or expect, okay, we use this AI technology. We use it since several years. It's come from America. We use it here in Europe. So it represents society. And that's also why we use it so frequently, because it's just representing our work, our nature and everything. But as you have heard, I work in the legal space, and from time to time, I need an image for my presentations. And I needed one image to represent a judge. So the good thing about the English language is we don't have any gender here. Yeah? In German, we always have a gender. If I say like the male version, I would also expect to get like a male judge as an image, as a picture. And if I would use the female version, of course, I would expect to get a woman here over here. But in English, it is not the case. We don't have like a gender here. So the question is, what do you think? What kind of person do I get from this prompt, create a picture of a judge in a courtroom? What do you think? Stand up if you think I will get a man. Okay, maybe you stay a little bit longer, because do you think the same if I tell you that in Europe the percentage of female judges is around 60%? You still think it's a man? Okay, thanks. Take a seat again. I mean, you are very true. You're very good. I mean, I already know the answer, so this is why for me it's super easy to answer. But it is true, I get a man. Why do I get a man? I mean, as I said, 60% of judges are women. So why? Maybe because in America we have only 30% of female judges. Might be, and all this technology was produced in America. This might be a good thing or a good reason because. But then I thought, okay, I get a man. I mean, second, if you just check this person, it also looks like very stereotypic. I mean, it has like white hair, it's an old white man, white of hair, white of color and everything. And they all look the same. So for me, it's very stereotypical judge imagination, let's say. And then I thought, okay, how is it with a legal assistant? What is the output of a legal assistant? So stand up if you think I get a man again. No, very good. I mean, you have worked quite a lot with these kind of systems, I see. So I get a woman, and I get a woman that is very young and also looks like very thin, like very beautiful, like what we think it is beautiful. And it's exactly what I see here in the results, what I also see in children's book. I have children, and I read all these children's books, and it is insane. The doctor is always the man, and the nurse is always the woman. And also for firefighters, it's the same. The firefighter in charge is always the man, and the support person is always the woman. And I'm really sick of it because I'm a feminist and I don't want to see it. And as I said, in Europe we don't have this. This is not reality. Most of the judges are women. So why do I get these results, these stereotypical results? This shouldn't be the case. And the problem is, this isn't a picture from years ago. This is a picture from like 3 months ago that I created. Yeah? So, and for us, it is just maybe representation. But for underrepresented group, using AI solution in high-risk environment, this could cause harm to them, as we see here in this newsletter. Yeah? So for us, it's not a big deal because we don't feel represented, but many things can happen if we use this kind of system in police work, for example. And this is, I mean, this is not something philosophical. It is even worse, because in Germany we are talking about an AI software supporting the police work. We are still talking about it. Maybe if you have heard about the Palantir thing, then this is still a very important topic we need to talk about. And I also have a friend from the underrepresented group who wanted to have like a picture for the ID card. And the software was not working because it wasn't recognized as a person, as a human. So we still have this issue nowadays. It's not something from years ago. And we still didn't solve this problem. Some people tried to solve this problem. Maybe you have seen this research from Stable Diffusion, that if you create like a picture of a firefighter, a photo of a firefighter, you get always white men here. And in this research, they thought, okay, maybe let's add like a diversity table. So also tell the system that we want to have more diversity in sense of women as well, from different countries, skin colors and all these things. So, and what they made at the end is a very diverse output of the same prompt. You see like firefighters from Asia, women, men, so very diverse output here. So this is really great. So they tried to solve this diversity issue with adding like this diversity lookup table. But the problem is with Gemini that we cannot do these things in all cases, yeah? So if we try to fix one thing, we have a hole in another one. We have an issue for another problem. For example, in historical aspects. If we want to have, for example, a photo of a German soldier from 1943, we get this kind of diverse output. And I mean, historical reasons, this wasn't really true. And also having a photo of a pope is not possible as we see it here, yeah? So Gemini, who produced this kind of images, they already stopped it, and they said, okay, we also try to fix it. But at the end, it's always, if you just add this kind of topic, like diversity or ethics, as like a checklist, you always try to solve or fix problems all the time. And this shouldn't be the real solution. So what can we do to change it at the very beginning? So not to create AI solutions with all these topics that we just saw. I think we really need to think the whole ethical topic. And we should not think about the philosophical part of these ethic topics. We should go a different way from my perspective. As I said, we live in the European Union. And what do we have in common? What do we have, all the countries we have here, what do we have in common? These are the fundamental rights we have. And every country in the European Union signed contracts about fundamental rights. They are legally binding. So if your software or if you do something that is against these rights, it will be super expensive for you, I tell you. And we have like 5 different fundamental rights that are most important in the topic of ethics. And these are like the fundament of the ethical discussion, yeah? So we have like the fundamental right of respect for human dignity, individual liberty, respect for democracy, justice and the rule of law, equality, non-discrimination, solidarity, and civil rights. So these are the most important fundamental rights we need to take care of if we produce AI software products. But now maybe you wonder, okay, I mean, yeah, for sure, it's clear, I can imagine, fundamental rights are important, but how can I implement them into my AI project? So what we have to check our fundamental rights are these kind of parameters that we have. And these parameters align with our fundamental rights within the European Union. So, for example, if you make your system secure, you can be sure that you are within the fundamental rights and that you try to go in this direction, yeah? And therefore, something like robustness and security is super important. Also something that is super important, you have maybe also realized in your AI project, is data privacy and data quality as well. So if you try to always check if your data is private, if your data has high quality, you also have a check mark for your fundamental rights, let's say, yeah? So what you do at the end, you have like an AI compliance check by checking all these parameters all the time, the whole life cycle within your AI project. And here, and one of these parameters is, for example, diversity or non-bias. So if you try at the very beginning of your AI project to have a checklist with these parameters, you're on a very good way. And at the end, what you create is not an ethical AI, it is even more what you get. You get a transparent AI and a trustworthy AI. And maybe have you read the AI Act? Maybe just raise your hand if you have read the AI Act. A little bit, I mean, not in detail. I know it's a long thing, long paper. Great. And if you now check the number of words you find trustworthy in this AI Act, it is quite a lot. And what we see here is that trustworthy AI is the goal of the European Union. Because who's using AI systems? It is us. The people use AI and they trust these AI solutions. And this is why we need to make sure that within our AI solutions are included the fundamental rights. Yeah? So there's something super important. And if your goal is not ethical AI, but trustworthy AI, then you have these 3 different pillars that you take care anyway, or that you have to take care in order to build trustworthy AI. So these 3 pillars are the most important part of AI solutions. These are transparency, ethical topics and as well responsible AI solutions. So what does it mean in your daily life process or if you create AI solutions? So first of all, let's get into the transparent AI part. Many of you, you work in the AI space and you know what transparency of AI means. It is mostly open source and open data situation. Because what we need to be aware of is none of the data that is available out there is not biased. I mean, the data is not neutral. It doesn't matter if you take a look for a certain data set. It doesn't matter if you scrape the internet or something. It is always biased. And this is what we see here in this analysis. I will just tell you, because I think at the very back you don't see it very well what is shown here. You see here different data sets. In the upper part, you see the data sets that include or contain like faces of people. And you see the number or the percentage of people with white skin color, for example, or black, or you have Asian people. So what is the amount, percentage of people who are represented within these data sets? And you see that many of these data sets, they focus only, for example, on Asian people, or only on black people, or white people. So what you see here is none of these data sets are really unbiased. You don't see any of the data sets that have equally represented all the different groups here. And in the lower plot, it is more or less the same, but with men and women. So most of the data sets, they have more men represented than women. And mostly if you think, okay, I'm a man anyway, so I don't care because I'm one of the good person. But I mean, most of the men who are represented are between 30 and 50. So also younger people are not very well represented, also not kids and also not older people. Yeah? And if you think in the way that we produce or make AI for people, not for men between 30 and 50, then you know that we should keep track of it. And you should also, of course, make an analysis of your data. What kind of bias do you have? And this is what I mean with transparency. You should know your bias that you have within your data set. And if you have any bias, try to make a balance of the data sets or the categories to remove or reduce at least the bias. And for images, this is of course very clear, but you have something very similar also for language models. If you take a look to Llama 3, you see that most of the training data comes from English data sets. 95% comes from English data. And this is a big issue because non-English data is only 5%. And this is represented or represents 30 different languages. So what is the representation of each language here? Within like German or French language, what is the representation? What you have at the end is not a very well representative language like French. You lose like nuances or accents. You lose special information in these parts, yeah? So you have a very good representation of the English language, but not the others. This is a big issue. And now you could think of, okay, it's again representation, I don't care. Maybe in the future we will all speak English, it doesn't matter anymore. But you also may have privacy risks. And before I start to explain a little bit what I mean with this is I would like to promote the blog articles of Catherine Jamul. So I took all this knowledge from her blog articles. She talks or she writes about data privacy within AI models, about memorization of AI models, unlearning information from AI models. Super interesting and super important topics. So what happens is, if we have underrepresented groups, it means they are outliers in your data examples. And outliers are always easy to identify and to get information out of it. So outliers are always a high data privacy risk. We have some research was done with in-painting attacks. And what's happening with in-painting attacks is you have like an image, you mask the image, and you tell the AI model, please reconstruct this kind of image. So if the image was constructed in the way that you don't see anything, it's very fuzzy and everything, you know that this kind of image is not represented in the training data. But if you get like an image, a generated or regenerated image, that where you identify like faces or objects or animals or something, then you know that this kind of image was within the training data. And this is especially true for data that was very rare within the data sets. So it was easier to reconstruct rare examples. Yeah? So meaning if you have underrepresented group within your data, training data, you may have or you may add data privacy risks for these underrepresented group. You're not having an issue with representation, but also with data privacy. The reason here is that the rare examples you have within your data set, the large language model will try to learn as much information as possible from these rare examples because it wants to reconstruct these kind of images. But this is an issue. On the other hand, what we see here as well, and also here like for the llama model is, you see that they took a lot of English data, meaning, I mean, I would doubt that all of these data they used was just like a unique data. Many of the data, as you can see here with my little baby peacock here, was used several times maybe. Maybe you have text information double or 3 times, or I don't know, and you put all these information 3, 4 times in your AI training. This is not super efficient. I mean, it costs you money, energy, and time if you add all these information twice. Doesn't make any sense. So always check what is the data you really need. Is this data needed to improve your model or not? So is your data well represented or not? Or is it just a unique example or not? So try to make a balance within your data here. And in Europe, we have a few first projects that try to have a more balance between the languages, for example. We have, for example, the OpenGPT-X project, which was created by the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, who created the Teuken model. And the Teuken model has only 40% of English data, and let's say around 8 to 9% German data or French data, also around 9% coding information. So this is the first step more to open source and as well to not biased information. And what they did in addition to trying to have a balance between the languages is also they only take data without violating copyright. So meaning if you get something out of this model, you can be sure that you don't violate copyright. Yeah? And also data privacy issues you don't have in this case because they took only data that was, I mean, secure to use. So if you want to choose a large language model for your project, maybe next time you just take a look and check it, and just check if it is enough for your use case. It is much smaller than the Llama 3, like Llama 370B, and this is something like a 7B. So it's much smaller, but this also saves a lot of energy and cost, of course, because it's smaller. Another AI project is the Apertus model. So this was created by the ETH Zurich. And what they did was also full transparency of the whole project. So they made the model weights public, they made the data set public, the training, documentation, the evaluation process, everything is public. And so what they did at the end, they created a model that fulfills the AI obligations, the transparency obligations. And the good thing about it is, if you want to create or if you work in a high-risk environment defined by the European AI Act, then you can easily choose this one because it is transparent. Everything is transparent. You can check up where the data comes from and how it was evaluated and all these things. Yeah? So if you work in high-risk environments, something like critical infrastructure, police work, legal aspects, or anything else, you can go and choose this one without any issues. You couldn't do the same, for example, when you use ChatGPT. This isn't transparent at all. You cannot really use this in high-risk environment. And for ChatGPT, you also don't know what kind of data was used for training. Yeah? So this is a big issue, and these are the first steps, I think, in a very good ethical way, and to trust at the end AI solutions. Something else I mentioned is the second pillar, the ethical part. I already talked quite a lot about fairness and bias in AI system and mostly data, yeah? But what most people underestimate is the carbon footprint. And therefore, I would like to concentrate now on the carbon footprint of large language models. And I would just give you a rough information how much they use or consume in training and also in doing inference, because many people, they don't know about it, and I just want to have it more public. So now it's up to you. So what is the carbon footprint of different things? I will now ask you a few questions, but I will tell you in a second. Before I will ask you, I give you a little reference. So first of all, to get an impression what the carbon footprint is, yeah? So a person living in Germany takes around 10 tons CO2 equivalent within 1 year. Yeah? So this is more or less a number you can work with now. A car from the US produces in its whole lifetime around 57 tons CO2 equivalent, including the fuel and the production. The production is very high, intense for the carbon footprint. Yeah? And now the question is, what do you think is the carbon footprint of image recognition training? So if you train ImageNet with ResNet 18, please stand up if you think it is more than the carbon footprint of a car, or stay seated if you think it is less. Okay, I think 70% say it's more. Thank you. So this is the number, this is the carbon footprint from ImageNet. 0.001 tons CO2 equivalent. I mean, at the end, you can train it on your laptop, so it's a pretty small AI model, yeah, or training set. Now the question is, what is the carbon footprint of Llama 3, 70B? 70B, yeah, not 8B, but 70B. So please stand up if you think it is more than a car, or stay seated if you think it is less than a human. Okay, most of you think it is higher. It is much higher. You can take a seat again. So just look to the number. It is around 2,290 tons CO2 equivalent. Yeah? I mean, just look at the number and think about it, how much it is. And the point is, now I always give like maybe bad example of Llama, which is a little bit unfair. But the point is, this is a number that you can check up on Hugging Face on the model card. They are very public with all these kind of number meta, yeah? But for ChatGPT, we cannot tell what the carbon footprint of the training process was because they don't make it public. We can just assume that it's maybe roughly around the same as for Llama, but we don't know. There are some estimations, but we have no idea what the real carbon footprint of ChatGPT is. Also of ChatGPT 3, 4, the reasoning models, or any of these models, we have no idea. Maybe this number, I mean, not maybe, it is quite large, insane large, but we know this kind of number. And so the question is always, what is the carbon footprint? And can we really, or should we support this kind of system? The point is as well that GPT-3, for example, is pretty small in comparison to GPT-4. If we think about the training of GPT-4, you can imagine that with this more numbers of parameters, you also have a much more increased carbon footprint. And this is something you should always be aware. And now, of course, some people just reach out and say, okay, but this is a training. You just train it once, and then it supports you all the time. And you can even use it for AI use cases reducing carbon footprints in your project. Of course, this is true. But still, every inference also produces carbon. And the point here is that, for example, for text generation, it's the left circle, it requires around 5 grams CO2 equivalent. I mean, for 1,000 text-based requests, but still, it produces carbon footprint, yeah? It produces carbon. And if you want to generate an image, it's 40 times higher. So what does it mean for your next project? Or if you generate just for fun in your private life, if you generate an image, it just means that you should think before you really generate an image. Do you really need this kind of image? Are you doing it for fun or not? And what is your prompt? Do you work or do you generate images in like these life cycle things? So, okay, make this image, and now I say, okay, this image was okay, but change it to that one. Is this really necessary? Or can you maybe start directly with a prompt that you have thought about and creates directly a very good image? Maybe in your project, private life, you just keep track of it and think about it. Something else you can do to reduce your carbon footprint is also to check the server location you're working on, where you do your training or your inference or all these different things, yeah? Just check where the server is located. In ChatGPT, you can always define the server location. You can choose France, US, or Sweden, I think, all the different locations. And you can choose the location by checking up the grid electricity factor. The grid electricity factor is a number that tells you how much coal was used to produce energy for these server locations. It also tells you, for example, if nuclear power was used or if renewable energy were used. The smaller the factor, the better, of course. And we see, for example, here in Iceland, we have a super small factor of 0.0001, which is really low. So for the future, maybe try to get a server in Iceland. Also, France has a very small grid electricity factor because they use nuclear power and doesn't produce that much carbon. In Germany, in Netherlands, and the US, we are pretty much the same. We have a pretty high, and to be honest, a pretty high factor. So the next time if you set up the whole system, your whole project, you should always check, okay, can you stay within the European Union like France? So you have all the GDPR rules also available over there, but just perform your inference in France? Or do you really need to choose a server location in America or even in Germany? Is it really required? Just check it up next time. And as I said, it's not about carbon footprint, it's also about the price at the end. I mean, if you don't care about our natural environment, fair enough, for you, not for your kids, but for you. But just think about the costs. The smaller the model, like the OpenGPT-X has around 7 billion parameters, and of course it's much cheaper to run it on a server than Llama 3 with 7 TB. Yeah? So you pay only €2 per hour for OpenGPT-X if you run it on AWS, and for Llama 3 7 TB you pay around €20, so €10 more per hour. And your customer, I think, would be interested in this kind of number. Just check it up. Of course, from time to time, this information, they vary. Also, the location of the server, you need to take into account here in this. But just to give you a comparison between the numbers and the cost, yeah? Last but not least is responsible AI. That is also something super important. I mean, I know that many of you're really sick of all these legal topics, and we don't want to think about legal issues and all these things, but at the end, it is important, not only because we need to run the AI software somewhere and we need to, and all the regulations are legally binding, but it has also some advantages, yeah? So this is like some information from GDPR, for example. GDPR has some main principle, let's say. Yeah? GDPR, for example, says that you should always minimize the data you use. And it makes sense, what I have told you just before, because if we minimize the data, if we think about the data we really want to use, we avoid double information. We would also avoid bias. Could reduce bias with just thinking what kind of data you want to have in your training data set. Not only avoiding like data privacy issues, something like this, also you reduce the cost. It doesn't make any sense, to be honest, to take data from when you have like a Tesla car and you have a 5 hours highway drive with the same weather condition, you take like these 5 hours in data and use it for training. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't improve your AI model, but it reduces costs. And it's under GDPR, it is also not allowed. Yeah? Also, GDPR tells you that you should be transparent where you store your data. And I mean, of course, it is written there that you should be transparent with this, but it also makes sense in case of carbon, as I just told you before. So be transparent where you save your data. Think about where to save your data. Do you want to save your data in the same country you work, or within Europe, or international-wide? Think about this information and make this decision right before you start with your AI project. Because these decisions, they have so many consequences. Consequences in the sense of price, in the consequences of carbon footprint, data privacy, all these things, yeah? So all comes together with regulations. Another information or another principle from the GDPR is that you need to have a purpose of the data. You need to know why you need this kind of data you want to have for training. So you have a purpose limitation of data. You are not allowed to use your data for 2 different AI projects. What at the end just simply means that you should, again, think twice before you use the data. What is the reason you need this kind of data? And do you really need private information? Or is it just enough to have general text information available? And maybe you can build on top of it another solution. Yeah? So also think about why do you need your data and what is the purpose? What is the use case at the end? Of course, we have some more and more regulations. The European AI Act that we have just started, and something I think very good in this European AI Act is, for example, also AI literacy. What I see pretty often is people use AI and they don't think about it. But with AI literacy, so teaching people how to use AI, and what is behind all these models, and what is transparency and what is not transparency, I see that people start to think about what kind of data they should add to ChatGPT, for example. Do we have like a data privacy violation here or not? And this is something I think that is pretty great. We all think that regulation is a stopper for innovation. But from my point of view, it's not a stop of innovation. It gives you structure for your AI process. So if you have a legal department in your company, then you should ask about these kind of regulations and ask the people, okay, what can we do to fulfill these regulations? And the point is you have then like a checklist at the end, yeah? But with a structure, and every AI project, of course, needs a structure. And something also many people I see in the company they are not aware of is, for example, copyright. The copyright issue is quite big because we not only have copyright at the very beginning, so we are not allowed to use every data for the training, but we also have it at the end when we produce like generated text or images. None of you can decide if the generated text or image is too close to the original one. I mean, this is decided in court. And this is a decision you cannot make. And if you have no idea what kind of training data was used, and if it has some copyright included, then you have no idea if you violate at the end copyright. And this is something you should really be aware of. I know that in America we have this fair use system and everything, but in Europe we don't. It is a different case, and therefore we should always be transparent with the training data we use for training. And also, if you build up a wrapper with ChatGPT, be aware that the people who are using this kind of AI system, may violate copyright, and this is a bigger issue then. So at the end, what I just want to mention is we have the different pillars for AI products, and at the end, they all come together in one word: trustworthy AI, because we don't produce AI solutions for us or just to have fun creating them. We create them for people, and they should trust AI solutions. And therefore, I think we should always keep in mind all these pillars. Before you start your AI project, check all these 3 pillars, and you will create a trustworthy AI. And then you will also take care about the ethical aspects as buyers, for example. Yeah? So, I mean, that's all of my presentation for today. If you have any questions, I'm super happy to answer. And we can just have, hopefully, a glass of wine later and have a little chat.